Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. And today we're going to nerd out about bikes. Big surprise, it is a biking channel. But specifically, I thought I would share with you guys some tools that I use when I do bike reviews, and it would hopefully kind of help you find the bike that you actually want to get. Um, no guest night, so you guys are stuck with me, unfortunately. And this should be interesting. I'm testing out a new streaming setup. So if you're in the chat, I see you, Steve. Let me know how it's sounding. I've had issues with the audio being too low in the past, and hopefully this will fix it. But first off, interesting thing on the channel, like I've reviewed over 80 bikes at this point in the 4 or 5 years I've been doing the YouTubes. And my main motivation for reviewing bikes was because, I was just not happy with the bike reviews that were out there. They're really vague. They felt like puff pieces. To me, there was a question of like editorial integrity. Were people getting paid to review the bike? And most of the reviews that were out there were basically like reading the spec sheet for the first two-thirds of the review, and then like this tiny bit with kind of vague adjectives about ride quality and all that stuff. So I wanted to see for myself what the difference was between bikes, and if I could pin down those differences to specific things in the geometry beyond just like, just random whatever components are on the bike. So, okay. So Steve is saying that the audio is good. So this new like little streaming thing has some sound pads. I'm going to hit one that's supposed to make an air horn. I can't hear it. If you hear like an air horn, let me know. Or if you don't hear an air horn, also let me know. Okay. So that's kind of the history of why I started doing bike reviews and what I'm hopefully bringing to the table in terms of review bikes on the YouTubes. All my bike reviews are unpaid. When I'm done with the bike, they either get shipped back or I buy them and they become my personal bikes. Okay, so people heard the air horn. Sweet. What's wild is like, there's a sensor button and an air horn button, and I can't hear it personally, so I got to figure that out. But apparently, you guys can hear it. Cool. So all that said, I'm going to introduce you guys to some tools that I use. If you're on our Discord or if if you're a fan of the channel, then you are probably super familiar with these tools because I talk about them a lot. So let's get into it a little bit. Let me see. I'm going to embiggen it. Okay, the first tool is Bike Insights. And this is like probably the one of the sites I use most in reviewing bikes. And the way I use it is I'll look up, let's say, a bike. Let's look up a bike I'm currently reviewing. Sklar Super something, size 54. Which I may or may not have just purchased. And, if you pick one bike, you can scroll down and it'll give you things like stack and reach, head tube angle, all this good stuff. You kind of taking it in faith that these numbers are correct. I have had some instances where some people have reported that the numbers were incorrect. But assuming that they're right for a second, this is a good way to look at a glance at the basic geometry of a bike. And I know this looks overwhelming. I'll break it down in a second. Where it gets really useful, however, is when you use this to compare it to another bike. I did this recently. Let's compare it to the Bambora. That's another very popular bike on the channel. So I own the size small. It gives you a graphical representation of the two bikes, which is, to be honest, pretty useless. It's kind of, big broad strokes. It shows you how they compare, but what you really want to look at is the numbers. So on this rightmost column, it'll give you kind of the differences. So the small Bambora has a much lower stack, and that difference is 30 millimeters. That means, if you wanted to get your bars equal, you'd probably have to put 30 millimeters more spacers. Interestingly, however, even though it's a size small, it's actually 8 mil longer than the medium-sized Sklar. So it's kind of cool to just see what, how this works out here. Okay, before in terms of which numbers are important, I generally think that there are two sets of numbers: numbers that define the fit of a bike, and the numbers that define the handling of a bike. Full disclaimer: I am not a bike fitter. Um, so, but I have had to suss it out for myself over the course of like 80 bikes. The numbers that help best describe how a bike would potentially fit is the stack and reach. That'll kind of ballpark you in how it should fit. Um, if if you want to use this tool to actually purchase your new bike, I'd suggest looking up your specific bike. Hopefully it's in the database, and let's say the bike fits you really well. It's got a stack of 583, reach of 370. As you research other bikes, then clearly you want to make sure that the stack and reach numbers are fairly close. I find like you can have a difference of 10 millimeters, a centimeter. It's not going to be the end of the world. You can generally compensate pretty easily, like a centimeter or 2 centimeter difference with some spacers, slightly longer stem. It's when things are like 4 centimeters off that should give you pause. So stack and reach, two helpful numbers, not the end all numbers in terms of determining fit. But again, I'm not a fitter. I'm kind of more, when I do the bike reviews, I try to focus on how the bike feels. So what are the handling characteristics, and what is it that's specific to the geometry that kind of determines how a bike handles. And turns out after you get a chance to throw a leg over 80 bikes, you can kind of pick things apart. Some people think it's like a magic trick or it's all fluff, but I really liken it to being like this is going to sound super pretentious now. It's kind of like being a sommelier, right? When you first start drinking wine, all wine tastes like wine, right? You can break it up into, red wine and white wine, tie that into bikes. That's like, road bikes and mountain bikes. But as you kind of develop your palate, try a variety of wines and bikes, then you can start to really differentiate the nuances of each bike. Are the nuances important at the end of the day? If you're just going to buy 1 or 2 bikes in your lifetime, probably not. But it's become my job to test these bikes and try to communicate the differences. So to me, it makes a difference. Let's see. All right, so we got 70 people in the chat. If you guys have questions about how I use Bike Insights, definitely put those in the comment section. And if you guys want to see, or if you want me to compare specific bikes, put that in the comment section as well. David Neese here has a great comment. I like to set Bike Insights with the tires on the ground rather than the bottom bracket alignment. Yeah, that's super helpful. Gives you a little bit more realistic or easier way to kind of decipher the differences. Okay, so to my mind, there are kind of 2 halves of the bike. There's the rear and the front, clearly. And there's certain numbers that help kind of describe how a bike could potentially feel. For me, one big factor is chainstay length. The shorter the chainstay, the quicker the bike tends to handle, or the jumpier it feels. Short chainstay bikes, when I stand and climb with them, they feel really kind of jerky and jumpy. Longer chainstay bikes, they feel smoother. Like I don't know if they necessarily go faster or if they accelerate quicker, but the way that they come to speed is more eased in. It's like the easy ease in. If you're familiar with like Adobe After Effects, it's not. Whereas a short chainstay bike just tends to be kind of jerky. I'm going to assign, or I'm going to try to not assign good or bad values. These are just differences. But that's definitely in all my experience. I've never ridden a long chainstay bike and said, "Whoa, that feels so jumpy." Typically, when it's long, and I'm going to define long by, let's say, 440, 450, 460. So bikes like the Ascent, the long haul trucker, the hardtack, Rivendell's very long rear end. Those bikes, when you climb, they don't lurch forward in a jerky fashion. They kind of like uh, slowly ascend. But if you like a bike where, to my mind, it's like spicy kind of climbing where you crank on the pedal and the bike kind of lurches forward, and it just feels like it's um, just somehow, all your momentum is immediately being put towards going uphill. Then that's where like a short chainstay bike comes into play. Um, Let's see. So we've got some fans of the long chain stay. Flo here says long chain stay equals good. Again, I don't like to assign values. I treat it like wine. There are different flavors. They're neither good nor bad. They're just different. Okay, so to me that's a pretty important number. To give you guys ranges, what I would consider short is things like 415 to 425. Those are kind of the chainstay lengths that you'd see in a road bike, road race bike, or not even like a racing bike. Like the Bambora clearly has a short chainstay. The Sklar Super something, it has sliding dropouts. So in its shortest setting, it's fairly tucked at 424. I think Adam said there were about 2.5 centimeters worth of play. So then at its longest end, it would put it at 440 or so. And I'm definitely going to do video on that. I've got a Sklar. I'm going to do the same climb, set it in tucked, and then push it back and see if there's any kind of noticeable difference. Let's see. So Darren asks, would long chainstay be noticeable on rail trails? If the rail trail is, typical rail trails don't exceed what, like 3% or 5% because trains. I don't think that. I don't think so. I think it's like how you ride. If you like to really crank on the pedals, and you might notice that the short chainstay bike still kind of has that jumpiness to it. But if you're just cruising, like it's pretty slim. Or more when climbing, I would say, to me, it's most noticeable when climbing or like high intensity efforts. So Steve here, bring back the bicycle flavor wheel. Yes, for you old school heads on the channel, I used to flash up a graphic, again, using like the food tasting analogy of describing bikes as like one would describe wine or coffee, and called it the bicycle flavor wheel. So Flying Kangaroo asks, short chainstays climb better. I don't think they climb better. They climb different. It's one way I like to think of it is if you're like in a really long canoe or a really short kayak. In the shorter kayak, as you paddle, you just feel it like immediately react. Whereas like in the long canoe, kind of more gently eases forward. I'm not saying one is faster at the end of the day than the other, but like how they get to speed feels noticeably different. I've found that like too long of a chainstay, like where the rear wheel is really behind you and it's steep and you're kind of cranking and leaning forward, that tends to unweight the rear wheel in my experience, and it'll kind of, I'll lose rear traction. For example, like the Ritchie Ascent, I forget what the chainstay length is. It's pretty long. It's like 460 or something. When I had drops on it, I was really kind of cantilevered forward. That bike would lose traction for me. I did notice when I rode it with an alt bar, something that would set me a little bit behind the steering axis on the steep climb, it was less likely to do that. So, so James asks, are you reviewing the Super something? Yes. Adam came by and dropped one off to review, and I ended up buying one. So I'm going to end up reviewing my personal Super something. He dropped off the small, and I should have known. I was looking at the geometry chart. I was like, it's going to be too small. But, Adam was like, this should be fine. But it's too small, and I ended up buying the medium. So I sized up. I thought this would be pretty instructive too, because recently I've been looking at Bike Insights a lot. If you guys follow us on the Instagram, you would have noticed that I've sold quite a few bikes the last couple of weeks. We're having a big life change. Not ready to talk about it yet, but we just have to get rid of a bunch of stuff. So I sold my Crust Bambora. I sold my Velo Orange Polyvalent. I'm in the process of selling my titanium Bear Claw Thunderhawk. So if you guys want a pretty good deal, I think, on a all-tie Thunderhawk, then hit us up on the Instagram. And there's a lot of overlap in these bikes, and I was trying to find one bike that would kind of do all the things and fit well. And the Sklar was a really good fit. So I used Bike Insights heavily to compare bikes that I owned with the Sklar and seeing how it compares. And it turns out Super Something's, it was kind of like an average of all those bikes. Let's see. So, yeah, where was I? I got sidetracked. So chainstay, I think fairly important in how the bike handles, in particular in climbs and in high intensity efforts. I feel like chainstay is really noticeable. Typically, I can usually tell like when a bike has a chainstay longer than 430, because that's when I kind of tend to lose the jumpiness that I like, and it becomes more smooth. Again, neither good nor bad, just a matter of preference. Another important number to look at is the trail. Trail is kind of the function of head tube angle, wheel size, and fork rake. They come up, all those things, through the magic of science and numbers. You get a trail number. Not to be confused with bike trail. A lot of people get confused by this, but let's say it's like the front end handling number instead of trail. I think that would be a better adjective. And typically speaking, the higher the trail number, the more stable it's going to feel, especially at speed. And the lower the trail, the more generally responsive the bike. One could say twitchy. Again, neither good nor bad, just adjectives. And to give you guys a range, like specific numbers, most road bikes are 55 to, let's say, 65 is that target trail number. A low trail bike, something like a Brompton or like a French constructeur that's designed to be a low trail bike, is probably in the 20s or the 30s. The Velo Orange Polyvalent was in the 30s. Soma Grand Randonneur is in the 30s. I think like a Brompton is like 29, so fairly low trail. On the opposite side of the spectrum, more progressive mountain bikes, they tend to have trails in the hundreds or the 90s. I don't know too much about those bikes. I will say the Husky Dogler, which is for all intents and purposes has like progressive mountain bike geometry, has very high trail at 104. Another good way to visualize high trail is if you think motorcycles, how slack they are. They're kind of designed to be stable at highway speeds, right? So they require higher trail. So high trail sounds good. Why don't all bikes have high trail? It's a bit of a compromise. Where high trail kind of sucks is if you're climbing at slow speeds, let's say a steep hill. It exaggerates wheel flop, and the bike tends to wander all over the road. It's what I like to call drunken goatiness feeling on the bicycle flavor wheel. So there are downsides. In terms of low trail, one of its best attributes is it's easy to, correct. It's easy to change directions at speed. It's very responsive. Another place where it excels is on a slow speed climb. Let's say, you're grinding up a 15% grade. You're moving like, maybe 5 miles an hour. Your handlebars will move because you're exerting effort and you're working, but the bike front end doesn't like flop over. You don't have to like wrestle the bike to keep it going straight. So that's one big advantage of that. Downside for me for low trail is is on dirt descents. You don't have the same stability as a high trail bike, as a basically a mountain bike. So that's trail in a nutshell. So those are the two kind of main numbers I look at. So chainstay length and trail. So a bike can have a short chainstay and low trail, and that equates to very responsive bike all around. Or the bike could have a short chainstay and higher trail, and that makes for a bike that's like jumpy on the uphills, but when you go downhill, it feels really stable and planted. That's a design that isn't as common, I think, because it feels somewhat unbalanced. But but I really enjoy it. Like a bike that is that falls in that category is something like this Ghost Grappler. I feel it's got short rear end, higher-ish trail front. So it's a bike to me that's fun to climb uphill, and it's also it's a blast going downhill. So yeah, we've covered a lot. Hopefully this is interesting, guys. Like, I know like geometry charts isn't like the most exciting thing about bikes, but after testing like 80 bikes, it's have some enjoyment from it. Let's see. Here's an interesting question. Which one is better if you have front panniers to keep it more stable? I think the thinking is that lower trail is better if you're front loading. Typically, low trail bikes will feel overly responsive when unloaded in the front, but once you start to put some load on there, it feels like a normal bike. A good example of this is the Brompton. So Brompton, super low trail bike. If you hop on it the first time, you're just like, most people are doing this. It's like shimmying all over the place. But the second you put on the touring bag, it doesn't have to be a ton of weight, then it feels like a totally normal bike. So that's generally the thinking. In practical experience, though, let's see. I've done some tours with the Via, which was kind of mid to high trail or mid upper trail with a front loading setup, and it did feel floppy. But to be honest, after the second or third day, you can adapt. I think that's another important point. These numbers are definitely important, but one thing that overrides everything is the human ability to get used to stuff. So you can have a preference, like I prefer high trail bikes and tuck chainstays, but you can also adapt to other geometries without you're not going to like throw a leg over like a low trail bike and all of a sudden fall over. You guys can do it. Okay. So let's see. So looking at this, I'm going to change. I'm going to use these two bikes as an example because this is how I used Bike Insights recently. I was debating about buying a Sklar, but I wanted to see how it fit in compared to my current bikes. And, when I had the Crust, I bought the small, and I love the handling, but it never fit great. Like if you ever saw pictures or video of me on it, I've got like a stack of spacers under the stem, like more so than usual, admittedly. Like, I ride fairly upright. But the stack was just like really low. And it just, I just didn't fit as well as I'd wanted. So that's one. So that's the main reason why I got rid of the Crustman bore. It's still, it's a great riding bike. A lot of people freaked out when they saw me selling it on Instagram. Is there something wrong with it? Nothing's wrong with the bike. It just didn't fit right. If there is one thing that did bug me about it, though, is it was a Gen 1. So the rear was flat mount and the front was post mount. And it wasn't like a end of the world deal breaker kind of thing, but yeah, that's just one like minor like quirk. So yeah, so you can see looking at the Super something, it's got more stack, so fewer spacers, but the reach is pretty similar, which is interesting. And also like the rear chainstay, it's 425, nice and short. It has that nice jumpiness to it, and the trail is almost identical. I'm going to compare it now to the Bear Claw. So the Bear Claw Thunderhawk all tie frame, tie fork. This is one of the best fitting bikes I've ever owned. It's an interesting size, 52.5. And this is what I stared at the most. Like I wanted the bike to be fairly. I wanted the bikes I could get a really close fit to the Bear Claw. And looking at the stack here, the Super something actually a little bit taller in the stack, so slightly fewer spacers. The reach, 6 mil, I can do that. So seeing that, I was like, okay. I love the ride of I love the fit of the 52 and a half Thunderhawk. Which Sklar is closest to that, and it was a medium Super something. So knowing that the fit would be good, next thing I looked at were the other numbers, which again, like we talked about, kind of determine handling. And the chainstay on the Thunderhawk that I have is 430. They increased it from 425, which was the very first like Gen 1. So it falls more in that all-rounder category, back to back. Like I feel like the Sklar, when it's in its most like tucked mode, just has that just like tiny bit of a spicier rear end, which I like. Interestingly, the trail is also higher on the Super something, which is fine. I prefer a higher trail bike on gravel bikes. It just feels better going downhill. Like if that, when you hit a rock, you don't feel like you're going to be deflected off the road. So, so typically, the ride, the fit was almost the same. The handling on the Super something, looking at the chart, tells me that's a little bit spicier in the rear, a little bit more chill in the front. And having purchased the medium and built it up, I can confirm it's just like how I expected. So so good job me for reading a geometry chart. I know I've been getting lots of questions about why selling the Thunderhawk if it fits so great. It's all tie frame, tie fork. It's a dream bike, and it definitely is. I mean, it's an awesome bike. Love it. Love the fit. Ultimately, this is going to sound like so dumb. Why I want to sell it, or not, depending on who you are. It's the internal routing. I could not get over it. Like a year later, every time I just hopped on the bike, looked down, it just bothered me to my core. And since we're going through, a big kind of vague life change where I'm going to have to minimize the number of bikes and still maintain the YouTube channel, having something that's internally routed is such a pain in the butt to test things, to mod things, to do the things I needed to do for the YouTube channel. So that is why I'm getting rid of this beautiful all-tie bike, mostly because of making YouTube videos. Okay, so Fraz says here, I like long chain stays for steep climbing. Otherwise, it feels like I might pop a wheelie. That's definitely true. I do think there is a tendency for the front to lift up a bit. I'm usually running some kind of bag with camera stuff, so it's less of an issue for me. I do like on a short chain stay bike on the steep climb how it feels as if like the weight's like directly on top of the bottom bracket going to the rear wheel rather than something too far behind. Yeah. Let's see. McGow Jobs here says mid-height trail easier to ride no-handed at cruising speed and above. And I concur. Like I feel like when I hop between a low trail bike and let's say mid to high trail bike, the low trail bike definitely gives me pause riding no-handed. So let's see. If you guys have questions or have bikes you want me to compare, I see Spencer here is asking about the Salsa Fargo and Cutthroat. Salsa Fargo is like the only drop bar salsa that I've not ridden. But I do have notes. There's one other thing I wanted to talk about. I might make a whole video on this, and it's Standover Height. So I don't know about you guys, but when I first got into bikes, what would pass for a bike fit would be hopping over a bike, lifting it up, making sure you have, half an inch or an inch of crotch clearance, and ta-da, the bike fits. How many of you guys have fit yourself to bikes using that method? Let me know in the comments so I don't feel like completely dumb. So I've done that multiple times, and that's actually how I ended up on the small crust. I was optimizing for Standover Height. And what I've discovered over the 80 bikes I've ridden, every time I've chosen a bike for standover clearance, it just, I have to run a gang of spacers. And it's, I can stand over the bike at a stoplight, but it just always feels a little cramped. I think it really depends on your body proportions. Mine are such that I have shorter legs for my height, so I ending up on too small of a frame if I go by crotch clearance. So anyways, so realizing that, I no longer do that, and I find myself sizing up. The thinking being that while standover is important, like I'm not saying like standover isn't important, especially if you have mobility issues, especially if you're going to do more mountain biking, then definitely standover is something to consider. But if you're riding road or gravel, where you're not going to have to do like a quick dab with your foot, then optimize for the riding fit rather than at the stop sign standing over the bike fit. So ultimately that's how I ended up on the medium size super something, because it, looking at the numbers, it fit better when I'm riding. There's not a whole lot of clear, like I think I'm like actually touching the top tube when I try to straddle the bike, but it doesn't make sense to optimize for that 1% when you're standing over the bike as opposed to the 99% when you're supposed to be riding the bike. So that's one thing I've learned in the 80 bikes I've tested. So the interesting thing, however, is that like this goes counter to some bike manufacturers. For example, Grant at Rivendell, he uses the PBH height, so pubic bone height. Measure it. You're up against the wall. You got the book, the top of the book to the bottom of the ground, and that's how they fit their bikes. And I did that with the Sam, and it's the same result. I got to raise the handlebars are really tall, a lot of seat post showing. It's still completely rideable, but again, if I knew what I knew now when I was considering the bike, I probably definitely would have just sized up. So that's something to consider. Standover, again, if you have mobility issues or if you're doing lots of off-road riding where you got to put a foot down really quickly, then it would take more priority. But for most types of riding, I think it's overweighted and can actually lead to a poorer fitting bike when you're riding, which is more important. Specifically, since it'll bias towards a smaller bike, you'll end up on a bike with a shorter head tube. And if you want to get your bars level or even with your saddle, then it's gonna be harder to accomplish. So I've found that sizing up just makes more sense. All right, so Dawn is in the chat. She actually purchased the Bambora. Hopefully, it's arrived already and is in one piece. Let me know. Yeah, I hope you end up getting fit or having the folks over at Cycle East and Austin build up the bike because they seem like good folks. Yeah, so Charlie here. Some of my best fitting bikes have the least standover, and that's been my experience. It depends on your body proportions. Like the Bear Claw that I have in 52.5, very little standover. Best fitting bike I've ever owned. So Don says it arrives tomorrow. Awesome. The Sklar in medium, really close to the Bear Claw, so it also fits really well. Very little standover. So David Murphy says Fairlight has a sizing tool that differentiates between standover and reach. Cool. I'm not familiar with that tool. I'll check it out. All right. So it seems as if the audio is working pretty well. You guys can hear the cool air horns. I cannot, so I'll just take your word for it. Let's see. What else did I have on the list to talk about? We talked about Bike Insights. The other thing I want to talk about is our new T-shirts. I'm going to do like a shameless plug here. So we've been working with our friend Daniel Mergen. He's the art director over at Adventure Cycling. And we thought, there's terms for cyclists like rouleur, grimpeur, puncheur. We thought chilleur would be a fun one. Chillestone time. So he made this illustration. Shirts up for sale, stickers coming soon. And if you guys like the channel, then this is a good way to support it. But the other tool is this one. If you type in bicycle trail calculator, for whatever reason, in almost all geometry charts, they leave out the trail number, which like we've hopefully established is like a good predictor of how a bike is going to handle. So this is a good way if you're looking at a bike that doesn't have the trail number, you can punch in the head tube angles. So let's change this to 650B because who rides 700C? Just joking. So it's interesting. Let's look at how the trail changes. So smaller wheel from 700. Actually, that didn't go the direction I was thinking. Let's see. So let's assume the head tube angle is the same. Fork offset is the same. We're just going to change the wheel size. So 29er wheel, 700. 48 millimeter wide, trail is 50. Let's change it to 650B. So it's going to be the same width tire, but it's smaller overall diameter. And it goes down to 45. So there we can see the relationship. Bigger wheel, bigger tire means higher trail. Converse is true. As the wheel shrinks down, you get lower trail. This has some interesting implications. So for example, let's say you were designing a bike around like 26-inch wheels, so smaller still than a 650B bike. If you didn't want it to have super low trail, you'd have to do certain things, right? You'd have to make the head tube angle less steep and adjust the fork offset. All right, so Bike Insights. Yay, Zach. Glad y'all are enjoying Bike Insights. Also referencing a previous comment, Russ, I think geometry charts are the most interesting thing, most interesting thing about bikes. Big fan of Bike Insights. I'm glad it's still up. Hopefully you guys are have the means to keep it going, because it's one of my favorite tools. Okay. So, like going back to the trail calculator, what's interesting is like how head tube angles change. So 73 is on the steep side in the realm of bikes. This is an angle that you'd see on a road bike. I think maybe a track bike. Lots of gravel bikes tend to be slacker. Let's slacken out that head tube angle and see what happens to the trail number. So let's put in 70, and then bam, trail goes up to 63 from, what was it? It was like 45 or something. So you'll notice that, let's go slacker still. I think what's it called? Husky Dogler was 66 or 67. Bam, higher trail. The trail gets higher. So as the head tube angle gets slacker, the trail increases. And what comes with that are all those things. So it's a little bit more stable at higher speeds, good for descending. Downside is it tends to flop all over the road like a drunken goat when you're going slow and uphill. So this is a cool tool. I encourage you guys to mess around with it and really get a sense of how all these three kind of variables playing together. So I've said this on. So you'll notice this thing called fork offset. And what's interesting is that most production bikes, when they do a size run of bikes, they only do one fork offset. So let's pick a kind of arbitrary but realistic number of 55. And the reason they do that is because in order to make fork offsets for each size bike would be cost prohibitive. So they tend to keep the same fork offset and adjust the head tube angle, in particular in the smallest and the largest size bikes. So for example, let's pick some hypothetical gravel bike. It's probably going to have, let's say, a 71-degree head tube angle in size medium. Yes, that's totally something that could happen. Trail is 60. And usually what happens is the smaller the bike gets, toe overlap becomes more of an issue. So they slacken the head tube angle to bring the front, to bring the wheel forward. So you could get realistically a head tube angle of something like 69. And you can see the trail changes. So what ends up happening is you're essentially, no one's riding the same bike. Because the trail number is changing. So we all have different experiences of the same bike depending on the size of the bike, which I thought was a pretty kind of curious thing that I've learned after testing a bunch of bikes. Okay. Hopefully this is interesting. If you guys have questions, put them in the comments. One interesting way to use Bike Insights, and I'm going to do this example with a recent bike I reviewed that I was really stoked on, was, let's see, Husky Dogler. All right. Hopefully you guys saw that video. So if you're not familiar, Husky Dogler, one frame, many uses, really borrows essentially progressive mountain bike geometry. And you can tell just by looking at the picture, the Dogler is in white. You can see how much longer the bike is in front. It's designed for handlebars with the shorter, for shorter stem, wide handlebars. This length takes up the reach, what would have been the stem, and the reach of the handlebars and brake levers if you were running a drop bar configuration. But let's say, Husky Doggler with the dropper post is like $2,000. And they do have a budget version for 1,600 that's coming out. I think it's a Dior build, no dropper. Let's say that's even still too rich for you. What you could do using Bike Insights or other similar tools is taking a look at those key numbers, stack, reach, trail, chainstay length, and just searching, setting up filters of bikes within the same range, and it might pop up a bike that's very close in geometry, but costs less. Someone brought this bike. Hopefully, it's in Bike Insights. I didn't actually look this up yet, but the Marin Muirwoods. Not exactly like 1-to-1, but in that generalish direction. Kind of. Actually, I feel like I looked at a chart and it was a lot closer than this. So let me see if there's other iterations. Muirwoods. You have to size it up. Yeah, sometimes it's hard to compare, medium to large. That's kind of doesn't make sense. Sizing is a little bit arbitrary with some bikes. So this is a little bit closer. I guess the Doggler is still slacker. What's the head tube angle? Yeah, 67.5. That's pretty slack compared to 71.5. But you can use a tool like Bike Insights to search for bikes that are similar to a bike that you want but can't quite afford. So let's see, 102, 442. Let's do a search. You can search by filters here. Add a filter. I usually just use these. You can do a range. So let's say 440 to 430. So that's something that's close to the Doggler in terms of the rear. And let's add head tube angle as another variable to search for. Let's try 66 to 69. And let's see what that comes up with. Hit search. Sometimes this takes a while. Did I do this wrong? Not seeing the bike. Maybe these are too narrow. Anyways, the point is I'm totally failing at this example, is that you can, let's say that there's some key indicators, some key frame stats that you want to look up. You can search within a range and see what it spits out. This is kind of a strange bike, so I'm not surprised that it doesn't cough up more results, but it does work. Trust me. Let's see. Okay. So I'm going to cruise back here and find some questions. If you guys have questions or bikes that you want to see compared, let's do it. I should mention, I don't plug this very often, but I do offer this as a service, kind of more of a in-depth 101. We can go into component builds and all that stuff. This is actually the first time I'm talking about it on the channel, just because it's a lot of time. Like I try to do research and make it worth your while. But if it is something you want to get into, it is something that I do as well. All right, I'm cruising to the top. Okay, so let's do this one. Supertramp versus the Super something. I tested the size medium, and we're going to change this to the super something. So, 54. Okay. So this is a good example because I feel like, someone watches my super something video and then they're like, well, isn't that just the same thing as the Sklar? They see the two wheels, the chain and the sloping or the curved top tube, and it's like the same bike or vice versa. But looking at the actual geometry numbers, they're pretty different. I mean, you can tell already that the Super Tramp is in white, much longer reach here again because it's designed specifically for short stem, some kind of alt bar. As opposed to the Sklar, you can see much shorter reach because it's anticipating that you're going to put like a 80 to 90 millimeter stem with drops that add their own amount of reach with the brake hoods, which add more reach. So this brings up another point. While you can put any handlebar on any bike, technically, some bikes are optimized for a specific set of controls, and I like to respect that and kind of understand that. Hopefully, the bike designer had that in mind. So we can see, reach is very different. Stack, 35 millimeter. You can, if you don't cut the steer tube, you can get them to fit about the same. Chainstay length, the Sklar is definitely much shorter. It definitely feels more like a road bike and less like a chill, ATV mountain bike / Rivendell-esque kind of bike. And in terms of trail, they're both higher trail than a road bike, but the Super Tramp is definitely, I'd say noticeably higher, but that's okay. Because it's meant for, short stem alt bar. Your hands are going to be probably in line with the steering axis and not cantilevered in front. So although it has high trail, because you don't have all that weight, kind of lurched forward, the steering feels really light. So and that's another thing you'll typically see. Like very intentionally high trail bikes are going to be designed with short stems and an alt bar in mind. And not drop bars, because once you start adding that weight in front of the steering axis, and it really makes it feel like a yacht. So good example. Let's see. Yeah, Velo Obscura here says touring bike has a 60 trail, so that's within that 55 to 65 that most road bikes try to fall under, and mountain bike has 120. So yeah, definitely. Okay, should I do the Salsa Fargo and Cutthroat? Let's see. Salsa Cutthroat. Throat, I can spell. So it's funny is when we owned Cutthroats, they didn't have numeric sizing. It was small, medium, large. So I'm going to guess that we were on, let's say 54th. I don't know how they size the Fargos. I don't know. Let's try medium. Okay, I think that's within reason. Let me see what the small looks like. Small might be a better analog to the 54. Okay. So we have here, so stack and reach, fairly similar. Head tube angles, identical. Chainstay length, identical. Trail, pretty close. Fargo being slightly higher. So in bikes like this, when the What else? Where's the bottom bracket drop? So that's pretty similar. So if I didn't know anything about these bikes, I'd say that they'd almost ride virtually the same. Again, I've not ridden the Fargo. I think they ship with wider tires. Someone tell me, Salsa Fargo, and that might be probably the biggest differentiator aside from weight. The tires definitely affect the handling. So yeah, it's a surprise to me. So it could be that the Fargo came out and the Cutthroat was just the lighter, zippier version of the bike. I don't know if Steve's in here, but let's see. Oh, Bike Insights. First number is Min, last number is Matt. Okay, gotcha. Thanks. Question about the Black Mountain Cycles. Yes, I've emailed. I think his name is Matt over at Black Mountain Cycles every single year since I've had the YouTube channel, trying to get a bike to review. And a small company, he's got better things than to send bikes to YouTubers. So I get it, but really hard to get a hold of a frame or a complete to review. Do I do some research ahead of time with the consult? Yes, I do. When you sign up, there's a little bit of a questionnaire just so I can make sure it's within what I know. Like, I don't want to waste your time or your money, like talking about things I have no idea about. So that it kind of pre-filters. But yeah, I try to take your questions, think about them, come up with examples for the consult. Oh yeah, Mike Varley. That's right, not Matt. So here's an interesting question. How much higher and shorter would you go on a bike that fits well with drop bars, salsa cow chipper, to swap to a Jones bar? That's a pretty interesting question. I find that the Jones bars have like a pretty healthy sweep back. So there's definitely a stem adjustment that needs to happen. And also, like, if you see how Jeff Jones sets up his bikes, I feel like the bars are fairly tall relative to like how roadies set up their drop bars. So I think it would have to go up and pushed out if you're on a drop bar specific frame. So hopefully that's helpful. Comment here from Steven. In general, head tube's way too short. Yes, I agree. And what else? So I've been yammering on for almost an hour about bike geometry. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. I'm gonna wrap it up in a little bit. So if you guys have questions, ask them now. I'm looking at the bottom of the comment section. I have no idea how people that stream on Twitch do this for multiple hours, because I can feel my voice going out already. Yeah, so Taylor says that's what's great about Black Mountain Cycles, ample head tubes. I feel like some brands are doing that, like the hardtack has a pretty good ample head tube. Sklar's okay. The Super Tramp, I feel, does a pretty good job. That's the Wild Bikes. Let's see. Any other questions? Not seeing else. Let's see. There's a question about the hardtack. So Bernie asks favorite bar handlebar bag. Zeitgeist or Restrap bar? Assuming the bent Restrap. I've not tried any of the Restrap bags. So I can't really speak to those, unfortunately. Dan V asks, how am I liking the hardtack? I took it out today, and it's a blast. It's a super fun bike. I think I enjoy it more with the alt bar than drop bar. I know that James envisioned it as a drop bar bike. I feel like the steering's gets a little sluggish with a drop bar, but is still fun and light with an alt bar. What else? So I was watching Francis Cade's bike fitter saying head tube length isn't the significant factor to reach. I've not seen that video, but head tube length refers to that tube. It refers to the head tube, and as it gets longer, it has a greater effect on stack. That's what will help you reduce number of spacers. So yeah, I agree. I'd say head tube angle has a bigger effect on reach. That's one thing I've learned too. Let's say you ride the bike with a 72-degree head tube angle, and all of a sudden you get on the bike, you purchase the bike with a 69-degree head tube angle, so it's slacker. As when you project that out to where the stem and handlebars are actually going to be, it's going to make the reach shorter. So that's one thing to consider if you're looking at a bike and it's got a significantly different head tube angle, that's going to affect your reach. Vice versa. Let's say you've got a bike with a 70-degree head tube angle, and then you purchase a bike with a 72. That 2 degrees doesn't seem like much, but when you project it upwards and out, it's going to increase the reach of the bike. Matter of taste. Ample head tubes look kind of funky. I think like a gang of spacers looks more funky. I'd rather have the head tube than too many spacers. Ashley asks, what is your next bike going to be? I've not made a video on it yet, but I did purchase the Super Something in size medium. So Don asks, Uno still coming out mid-June. The Uno is out now. If you go to somafab.com, you can get it. It's I don't even have my production model. I gave my prototype to Adam Sklar. He's going to ride on the Divide. So I figured that'd be a great test for the shifter. Hopefully it makes it. Yeah, so you can get that now. I'm going to warn everyone, the shifter probably costs more than you were expecting. It definitely costs more than I was hoping for, but that's just the cost of production today with like a good reputable heritage brand, if you will, in limited numbers. The small production numbers is key. Let's see. So Kim asks, I'm thinking about an alt bar and the Stargazer because I just can't seem to make the drop bars work, no matter how high or short the stem. Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're trying, like how you're trying to change the fit. It sounds as if the drops are too low and too far ahead. So alt bars would definitely work. I'd suggest looking at bars with some kind of rise to them. So something like the Crest Harvey Mushman is a great bar. Comes in different rise. It's great for like if you cut the steer tube too short, or the bike has really low stack, or if you're trying to make a 90s mountain bike more convertible and they have notoriously long reach, low stack. then it's a great bar for that. Okay, I'm gonna end the stream on this one because I've been thinking about this a lot. Can you describe the geometry that'd be your perfect bike design? So I'm gonna. I don't think it's not going to be perfect because everyone's preferences are wildly different. If I were to design a bike from scratch today, it'd be kind of weird. How can I put this? Like I've tested a lot of bikes, and what excites me now are like weird bikes. I've got a really weird one coming in on Monday that you guys are going to be like, what the heck is Russ thinking? So I think the all-rounder type bike has been done really well. So things like, that the Bambora cover, the Bear Claw Thunderhawk, Scholar Super something, they're all within that kind of all-road, so I mean, if you're going to go for like one bike that kind of does most things well, that's it. But in terms of the bike that I would want to design and ride for fun, it would be a bike that kind of takes cues from the Ghost Grappler, but is scaled to 650B tires. And what I like about the Ghost Grappler is, it's got that tucked rear end and slackish front end, which, like, if you guys have been here since the beginning of the stream, then I think that climbs really, really well, but also descends really well, also. But it's built around like too much tire for my daily needs, so I would want a scaled down Ghost Grappler. If that makes sense. Uno shifter will not work with a Paul Thummy. It's got too large of a barrel. The Paul Thummy, I think, is designed to work with the older cable pull Shimano shifters. It will not work with a Gavinel odd axe lever. Again, the mount on the Gavinels are designed around like bar ends that'll pull a 9-speed. The way that Uno works, I wish I had one. Mine is coming tomorrow. Is that it has a larger barrel diameter to pull more cable to work with modern rear derailleurs, and because of that larger barrel diameter, it doesn't work on the fitments that exist for 9-speed friction shifters. And all right. I think that's where I'm going to end it, guys. It's fun to hit buttons. Well, thanks for nerding out. Hopefully this was helpful. Definitely check out the merch store. If you haven't already, we've got all sorts of goodness. I'm going to throw that up here real quick. I like to joke that I'm just a YouTuber with a sticker salesman than a YouTuber, and that isn't too far off from the truth. AdSense is so like unreliable, so we really rely on our Patreon supporters and people that buy merch to keep this channel going. So we don't do a ton of sponsored posts, all that stuff. So if you like it, if you like our content, my weirdo take on it, then like, share, subscribe, pick up some stickers, and